The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Thank you for joining us here in FRC Media. We are getting closer to the November 7th municipal election, and we're speaking to as many candidates as possible between now and then. I'm pleased to be joined by former Bristol County District Attorney, former Mayor, who wants to get back to that position, Sam Sutter. Sam, thank you for joining
Keith,
me.
it's really good to see you. I enjoy these very much, and looking forward to your questions.
So, in the preliminary, you finished second, about a little over 35% of the vote.
Right.
There's some work to be done, no doubt about it.
Right.
What is your strategy in the last few weeks of the campaign?
My strategy is to get out the vote because I think that a majority of the people are with me. I think they're on my side with the issues, but I have to say that the incumbent did a better job of getting his vote to the polls, particularly in the early voting. So the early voting, according to the numbers that we received from the Board of Elections, so there were about 3,000 people who voted early, and it looks as if he probably got around 2,100 of those votes. So that's so 2,100 for him, 900 for me. So that's a 1,200 vote margin. I lost by 1,700, so that means I lost by 500 votes on same-day voting. That's not that big a difference in the same-day voting. So we're aware of that, and as I said, the issues are on our side. I mean, everybody wants to see a cut in crime. Everybody wants to see the tax burden being reduced from its annual spikes. Everybody wants to see new business coming into the city. Everybody wants to see more fairness with respect to who gets the best deals. Everybody wants to see more efficient management of the budget. So these are all issues where people want to see change, and I believe I'm the voice for change. Yeah. So if you are accepting of the way things are going with crime and with taxes and with the budget and with rents and homelessness and affordable housing and all those issues, well then maybe you wouldn't vote for change. But if you believe in me and that I can bring change, which I brought to the District Attorney's office and to City Hall, then respectfully I would ask you to vote for me on November 7th because you will see change. You'll see a brand new approach.
I do want to get into some specifics, specifically about the plan, because we had our debate here, and a lot of it was, there were some attacks back and forth, but sometimes, in my view, it doesn't necessarily serve the voters well if they don't know what your plan is. So I want to get into specifics about the plan.
Yeah, let me say one thing about that, though, okay, because it is a sad reality of politics. So I have loved politics since I was a kid. I loved sports, I loved politics. I think I essentially loved anything that had competition, trials. My father's favorite show was Perry Mason. And I listened to some political podcasts. And I was just listening to one within the last couple days. One of my favorites is called Hacks on Tap, with David Axelrod, famous Obama's campaign, Robert Gibbs, famous Obama's campaign, and then Mike Murphy, famous George W. Bush's campaign. So they were talking about negative campaigning, and the sad reality is negative campaigning works. And that's what Paul Coogan was up to at the debate. He decided to go negative. So he attacked me for applying for a job with him. That's a complete joke, a complete falsehood. He attacked my work ethic. Keith, there's no way you can win 90% of your jury trials unless you're an incredibly hard worker. It's not talent, it's not knowledge, it's hard work. Building a business, everything that I've done. So he went negative. So what choice do I have? I have to go negative back. I have to say you're lying, you know you're lying, and you're lying about a lot of things. So, but that's what's going on.
Right, I don't want to do that here. I want to get to...
But I just wanted to get that out of the way. That's what happened at the debate. I'm not good at taking a punch and not giving it back, so...
Right. Oh, makes a lot of sense.
Right, yeah.
So let's get to let's start with crime. Obviously, in your years as district attorney, you had mentioned during the debate that crime in Fall River had gone down. What other things can you do? And district attorney is different than a mayor because the mayor is the boots on the ground. District attorney has a wider area that he or she needs to cover. So how do you foresee as a mayor making an impact in crime? with some specifics.
All right, so what is the most serious crime that people face? The most serious crime people face is violent crime, and the most serious part of violent crime is gun crime. And we showed a steady decline in gun crime when I was district attorney because I worked effectively with the mayors and the police chiefs. So whether it was Scott Lang and Ron Teachman in New Bedford, or whether it was Will Flanagan and Jack Souza, and then Dan Racine in Fall River, we were working as a team to cut gun crime, and we were doing it in several ways, and I can do it again in the same way, even though I would be mayor rather than district attorney. So first, we need more police officers on the ground. Ideally, some walking beats. I've heard the chief talk about his interest in having some of the walking beats resume. They do work. But even just having more police in cruisers on patrol, and that we can do. We can do that in a number of ways, and I outline them in my position paper, which has been on my website now for several months. So let's start with the staffing of the jail. That takes a certain number of police officers. I don't have the figure right in front of me, but it's a significant number that are there having to staff the jail at the police station. That can be done more cost effectively, either utilizing the sheriff's department or utilizing a private agency. But we don't need to be paying police officers to be watching the jail at the police station. That's one way to get more police officers on the beat. Another way would be to use the cadet program. Now, in the wake of what the terrible tragedy to George Floyd, the legislature passed a bill that said no more auxiliary police, but they didn't pass a bill saying no more cadets. So you can use the cadets for some of the duties that police officers are performing right now, and once again with the ultimate aim to do what? To get more police officers on the beat, in the cruisers on the beat. So that's number one, more police officers, and everybody supports that, but he hasn't done it.
What about getting police officers to actually become cadets, go through the academy?
Of course,
which has been a challenge.
That's a great idea. So recruitment and retention, but recruitment and retention is kind of like bringing new business into the city. What does it take? Leadership. So I was at an event last night and I was talking about what I think I can do, and I said, why do you think, and I'm not comparing myself to Red Auerbach, but I said, why do you think the Celtics won so many championships between, I think their first one was 1957 or 1958, and when Red Auerbach finally retired? 16, wasn't it? Why? How did they do that? It started at the top. It started with Red. He was a leader. In addition to being a great talent scout, and in addition to being a great person to make trades, he was a great leader, and that's what we need. So let's take what happened last weekend. There were 3 shootings in the city, and an 18-year-old died on Locust Street. Now, Locust Street's pretty close to where I live. It's only 4 blocks from that famous sign that says, entering the historic Highlands. Paul Coogan should have been there. He should have been there. He should have been at that scene. It was in the middle of the day. For what reason was he not at the scene? I would go to the scenes of shootings, and I would go to this, particularly shootings, but I would go to the scenes of homicides. If the police think that the mayor is hands-on, especially somebody who was 16 years in law enforcement, 8 as a prosecutor, 8 as the district attorney. So I think that's a very good idea because of what it demonstrates. So it demonstrates leadership, it demonstrates concern. So we have more police officers in the cruisers and on the beat. We have a better approach to solving the shootings, the non-fatal shootings. The district attorney's office is in charge of solving the homicides, working with the local police department and the state police. And they're doing a good job. The solve rate is high, but it's the non-fatal shooting solve rate and the shots fired solve rate. And what can we do to improve that? Well, one thing we can do is we can bring back the gunshot technology.
Shot spotter.
There are others that are doing it now. So I'm not going to, when I say something's going out to bid, something's going out to bid. Okay? It's not going to be a rigged game, which it too often is now. It's too often a rigged game. The mayor knows ahead of time who he's going to give a certain contract to. That's not the way I've ever done it, and that's not the way I'm going to do it. So ShotSpotter will put in their, what's it called? There's a term of art that means request for proposal, okay? Right. Yep. And this other company that I just heard about will, and any other company is welcome to do it. And I'll have my team. and we'll study it, and we'll choose the best one. It doesn't have to be ShotSpotter just because I know the president, Ralph Clark. I was a big supporter of ShotSpotter right from the beginning, and Ron Teachman and I are friends, and he used to work with them, and I know Jack Pontius. No, put in a bid. The other companies will put in a bid, and I'll choose the one that's best for the city of Fall River. But I believe in the technology, and it worked when I was district attorney. That's it.
All right. I want to shift to affordability. Affordable housing, been a big issue in Fall River for quite some time. Again, we all realize it's not a Fall River issue, it's a national issue. But as was brought up by many candidates, people in Fall River only care about what's happening in Fall River. You had mentioned that the city has enough market rate housing. The mayor is talking about, bringing more in. How would you address affordable housing? I know you mentioned a lot about, in your statement, controlling rents.
Well, first of all, let's look at what hasn't been done and what I just can't understand and I can't accept. Is that my camera? Because I want to look at the folks, okay? Those of you who are renting, and by the way, we did a study. So do you know the percentage of people in Fall River that rent, Keith?
I do not.
75%. So for those of you who are renting, particularly those of you who are renting and are on fixed incomes, like my dear friend Marion Jean, who was living at the Highlander, the mayor needs to do something for you. And it isn't for you to bring in more market rate housing when 2-bedroom apartments with market rate housing go for $2,500. I know. I went to the new, well, it's been around now for about 5 years, Cornell market rate housing. And my nephew and I went in there and we inquired about a unit. There was one left, 2-bedroom. Do you know what it went for? $2,500. Who can afford that on a fixed income? And what do you think? I think all of us, you don't need to be an economist to understand this basic principle of a free market economy, right? If you keep bringing in market rate housing, what's going to happen to the rents in the 3-deckers and at places like the Highlander? The rents are going to go up because you're bringing in housing. Look, I'm almost done. Okay? So what needs to be done? Well, the first idea that you think about is rent control. And that's a big issue in Boston because they have the same issue we do, except their mayor did not turn her back and would not turn her back on the Affordable Housing Trust that was set up, $400 million. Paul Coogan didn't even put in an application for that. Why? Because he wants market rate housing. He doesn't care about the soaring rents. He doesn't care about affordable housing. So he didn't put in even an application for that. How about one that's a little bit closer in time? The American Rescue Plan Act. Keith? $80 to $90 million. The mayor of New Bedford, right next door, 20 minutes away, right away, $10 million setting aside for affordable housing. Think of how many units that could be. My understanding is that John Mitchell has put in another whether 10 million or thereabouts for more affordable housing. So that's what needed to be done as a counterbalance to all the market rate housing. Now I'm almost done here as I was with crime. So what would I do? Well, if there was any money left over from the American Rescue Plan Act, and I don't think there will be because I think he's spent it all now. But if there is, that's going to affordable housing, and that's going to be a priority. But controlling rents is also a part of this, controlling rents. Now, we have a situation in Massachusetts where rent control was abolished by the legislature in the 90s. You also have, however, a situation where there is a new bill in order to undo that so that there can be rent control. That's being sponsored by a state representative from Cambridge. We also have the option of going to the city council and saying, we need a home rule petition to control rents. And I think I would only need 6 votes. And I think I can get those 6 votes. And then I could go to the legislature and ask for a home rule petition. But I don't feel I need to go that far. And here's my plan, and I think it's a really good one. How many landlords do you think that you have in the city? Local landlords that live in Fall River. How many of those do you think there are?
No idea.
I would say there are probably a couple hundred, maybe a few more, maybe a few less. So
are these owner-occupied landlords, or just
owner-occupied and somebody
and
like
absentee?
I have a friend named Greg. I won't give his last name. He owns several three-deckers. All right, so that's part of how he developed his financial security, was to buy three-deckers. Okay, so you would get a list. You'd get a list of the landlords, and you would, one by one, call the landlords and speak to them about their rents and about controlling their rents, because you see, the mayor has leverage and the mayor can control rents, and this mayor has done
how?
because what do you think the leverage is? The leverage is, well, say Larry landlord, and I'm not talking about the owner occupied. Right. That's a little different situation. I'm talking about just the investors, local investors in housing. Well, Larry, you know, I could go to the city council and I could ask for a home rule petition to control rents. I don't really want to do that, but I could do that. And if I do that and they pass it, then I'm sure I can convince the legislature to do it, because it's only Fall River. It's not Springfield. It's not Worcester. So that's what.
Would that impact investment, though? Investment in these homes. In someone saying, I would like to invest in property in Fall River.
I'm not talking about single-family homes at all.
No,
I'm talking about the
rental
homes.
property, right? So if someone comes in and wants to invest in Fall River in rental property, they're going to say, well, will they say?
Who am I more concerned about?
Oh, the people living.
Who am I more concerned about?
The people living in that building.
I'm concerned about the 75% of our adult population that rents and is scared about what's happening to their rents. I'm concerned about Jennifer, whose landlord said he was going to, or she, I'm not sure, man or woman, raise the rent from $1,400 to $1,800, and Jennifer had to leave Fall River as a result and move to New Bedford. I'm concerned about the 92-year-old man that my wife knows, who's on a fixed income, who can't afford his rent. I'm not concerned as much, would you be, about investors? I'm concerned about the 75% of the people of Fall River who rent. And I'm looking you right in the eyes here, okay, folks? I'm going to go to bat for you, just like I went to bat on certain issues when I was district attorney and mayor, okay? I went to bat to cut gun crime. I did it through dangerousness hearings. I did it through sending prosecutors to the scenes of every single non-fatal shooting. I did it through aggressive prosecution in the courtroom. I'm going to bat for you, the renters of Fall River. And when I was mayor, I went to bat to redevelop the mall. I went to bat to finalize Amazon. I'm going to bat for the renters.
All right, let's shift to economic development.
I think you saw my passion for the renters.
Absolutely.
You bet.
So let's talk about economic development.
Okay.
You had mentioned your involvement in bringing Amazon and South Coast Marketplace. What more can you propose to do as
well? We have to do something about the downtown. And as I said in the statement that we just taped, in order to bring business, don't you think you have to have spent some time in the private sector? That helps you to understand the way the private sector works. So at 3 different times in my life, I was in the private sector as a lawyer. Most recently, from the time that I hung out my shingle again, and that was in 2016 until now. And what you have to do when you are a businessman is you have to keep your clients happy on a daily basis. Otherwise, what happens? They go to somebody else. There are a lot of good lawyers in Fall River. So in order to keep your client base, you've got to deliver results for them literally every single day. I had to build that practice, rebuild that practice brick by brick. So I understand the private sector. My father spent a lifetime in the private sector. It didn't always go well for him. I mean, God rest his soul. He experienced being fired twice. So the private sector can be cold, but the private sector also teaches you about business principles. And this mayor, I'm not sure he even had a job in the private sector when he was a teenager, but he certainly spent his entire life in the public sector, so he doesn't really understand business.
So how do you use that knowledge to say build downtown?
Well, you have to follow the same approach I did with the mall. So shortly after I was sworn in as mayor, I took a trip out to the mall, and it was, I mean, I hadn't gone to Kmart in a while. I hadn't gone to Payless Shoes, and I didn't get my hair cut at, I can't remember the name of the place, but I know the owner because I remember talking to him. And what I saw was, it was like a disheveled place. The parking lot was full of potholes and trash, and it was sad. It was pitiful. And I knew right there at the border with Rhode Island, with the casino coming, I knew we had to do something about that. So I started to work. And eventually my conversations with the owners reached the point where they said, you've got to bring in an anchor tenant. Maybe Lowe's, but the one we really want is Market Basket. So I set about it. I had a connection. I've told the story 100 times, right? I had a connection to Market Basket. Scott Lang was a very good friend of mine. He brought Market Basket to New Bedford. Right. He's so impressed with the DeMoulas family, as he impresses everybody, that he became one of their lawyers. So he arranged for me to start to have conversations with the hierarchy at Market Basket, and eventually I wound up talking to, I can't think of his first name, is it Arthur? He was about 80 at the time.
I believe so.
And I had several, and I was told you have to call him at this specific time, and it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and sure enough, or 7:30, and he answered, and I persuaded him, and he was not easy to persuade, but I persuaded him to come to Fall River. And once the developers had the anchor tenant, Market Basket, then there were other details to be worked out. It wasn't easy to work out those other details. This is what I'm proudest of. And by the way, you could ask the developers if this is accurate. So in October, the deal was final, but the developers asked me not to announce it. Now remember, I only lost that election by 600 votes. So as I used to say to myself about a close election I won, Paul Walsh, 1,800 votes out of 66,000 cast, I would say to myself, wow, if only 900 people had changed their mind that day, I would have lost. Well, if 300 people had changed their mind when I ran for re-election in 2015, I would have won. But the developers had their reasons why they did not want me to announce the deal. And they asked me to sit on it. And I knew that we had worked closely together at that point in time, Keith, for 9 months. And I was tempted naturally. I wanted to win. But I knew that it wasn't in the interest of the deal being completely completed. Yeah. So I sat on it in October of 2015, and look what we have.
Okay, what about moving forward?
Yep.
New development. What
you've got? Okay, so
we talk about downtown.
You need a hub,
sort of like an anchor tenant.
An anchor tenant. Okay. So what the status is of the Capitol Theater, for example, I don't know. I don't know what the cost would be. I don't know what you could do with grants or gifts or whatever. I know that I started that process in 2015, and then I didn't get reelected, and then Mr. Correa took over, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but there it is. There it is. And imagine if you could ever put it all together. Think about what that would do for the downtown. Suddenly it would start to flourish. The same thing in the Flint, okay, which is once again largely deserted. And I have an idea for what might be a hub in the Flint. But it takes, I mean, there are city planners that are experts in this, and I'm going to consult them, and I'm not going to be paying them, what is he paying for the tourism study, $800,000? I think that kind of thing can be done for a lot less money, and I'm going to work with those that are experienced and expert in this, and we're going to make it happen just as we did with the mall and just as we did with Amazon, and the whole city will start to turn around. Listen, I want to emphasize this. I know we're getting close here. I want to emphasize that I think Fall River has a very bright future with the right leadership, with the right leadership. We can, I mean, everybody's talked about the city's potential, almost to the point where it's become a cliche. But there it is. We have a deep water port. There are only 5 places that have that. We have a bridge that has 100,000 people going back and forth every single day. How many cities have something like that? All the people have to do is turn right as they're coming across the bridge to come downtown. But we need to have more attractions for them besides the Battleship and besides Lizzie Borden. And I have all kinds of ideas for what to do. Why, for example, couldn't we do the kind of thing that Lowell does? Lowell has this tour called the Mill Girls Tour, and it's very popular. My daughter went on it when she was in 3rd grade. It excited her so much. She woke me up. I was asleep when she got back, and she woke me up to tell me all about it. I'll never forget it. So there are lots of things we can do, but you have to have the energy and the drive and the verve.
I want to move forward. A couple of others before we wrap up. You mentioned
I've
again,
talked so much, I need to take a...
You can take a sip while I develop the next question. In your statement, you also mentioned about being fiscally responsible. What does that look under a Sutter administration? What does that mean?
Well, I give the previous mayor, not Paul Coogan, but the mayor before that, obviously he had his issues, but he also had ideas. Let's face it, he had ideas. And he also appealed to people outside the inner circle of Fall River. That was a key part of his popularity. So I'm just going to put that out there right now. People wonder, how did he get reelected when he'd been indicted? That's because a lot of people identified with him. They felt that he was on their side, not on the side of the same people who've been running Fall River for 50 years, right? Not on the side of the insiders, on their side. So why do I bring him up? Because he went to something called zero-based budgeting. And you know what that is. Mm-hmm. That's where you say to the department heads, no, we're not going to go year by year here. We're going to go month by month. You're going to have to justify every expense that you have. And that's one change that I'm going to make. I'm going to look at that budget, and I learned my lesson. I learned my lesson the hard way in 2015, as you know. Right. And I want to look at the folks again and say, there will be no new fees. First off, I didn't do the purple bags. The previous mayor to me did the purple bags. I got stuck with it. And the reason why the purple bags were a terrible idea is because they hurt poor people and struggling people. So it was a terrible idea, but I was stuck with a contract of, I think, 4 years. I did put in the new fee. I put in that new fee, $10 a month, in order to save the jobs of cops and firefighters and city hall workers. I was told, put it in, generate an additional $3 million, or you're going to lose 25 cops, 25 firefighters, and almost that many city hall workers. And I just couldn't do that because we need the cops and we need the firefighters. And I tell that story. But what should I have done differently? What I should have done differently is, but it was my first year, and I was stuck with the previous mayor's budget. I was in the middle of a fiscal year. Mm-hmm. But I should have taken a scalpel to that budget. And that I will do now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take a scalpel to the budget. We're going to look at all of the unnecessary spending, and it's going to be gone. And I believe that with that, we're going to be bringing in new business. So cut the unnecessary spending, bring in the new business. We're going to be able to reduce the tax burden.
Quickly, one other topic before I give you the opportunity to speak again to the voters is education. MCAS scores, which were released this fall, showed slight improvement, but the city is still far behind where it should be. As chair of the school committee, how can you help?
So I went to the school committee debate the other night. I was stunned that the mayor wasn't there, inexplicable to me. It was an inspirational debate of the school committee. Do you know why? Because they asked the questions, and their questions were great. You just felt so good about the city when you saw these kids. They asked all the right questions. They asked about chronic absenteeism, which sounds like it's worse than ever. They asked about teacher retention. They asked about school violence. Every question was impressive and important. And I went up to them and talked to them afterwards, and I said, the one thing I didn't hear, which I think is essential from any of the candidates, is I didn't hear about what other cities that are right now doing better than Fall River are doing. So let's face it. If you look at a graph with respect to improvement, I can guarantee you that there are other cities like Fall River in Massachusetts that are doing better. I think we need to then look at those cities and say, what are they doing that we're not? On the issue of teacher retention.
So in some ways, no need to reinvent the wheel.
Comparative analysis is something that I believe in. And I told those kids the story of how I came up with the idea that I'm probably best known for after Aaron Hernandez. So I was the DA that indicted Aaron Hernandez. Tom Quinn was the DA that convicted Aaron Hernandez. But I'm very well known for the dangerousness hearings. Right. Was that an original idea? No, that wasn't an original idea. That's what they were doing in federal court. So when I would go up to federal court to defend clients there, I would see that somebody that was caught carrying an illegal gun was getting held without bail. And the attempt was made to rapidly prosecute. So that's what I mean. We've got to look at what other cities, not just in Mass, but throughout New England, throughout the region are doing that's working, and then try to bring those techniques to Fall River.
All right, I want to give you the last moment. The voter of Fall River is before you. Why should they vote for Sam Sutter?
So folks, I want you to know right from the beginning that I care deeply about the city, and I think I demonstrate that through all the clients that I've represented over the years and how hard I work on their behalf and how hard I have worked on your behalf. So I care deeply, and I believe so strongly in the future of the city. We've got an ideal location. We have a deep water port. We're close to Providence, close to Newport, close to Boston. The train is coming, a waterfront that can be developed, a downtown that can be developed, a Flint area that can be developed. But we need change. We need to cut crime. We need to reduce the tax burden. We need to bring in new business. And we need to do something about these soaring rents. So many of you, 75% rent, and you're nervous, and I'm nervous for you, and I've got a plan for you. I've got a plan. This present mayor, Paul Coogan, doesn't have a plan for any of these issues. I've got a plan for your rents. I've got a plan to cut crime. I've got a plan to bring in new business, and I've got a plan to reduce your tax burden. So I'm asking you, please, remember to vote on November the 7th, and respectfully, I ask for your vote. Thank you very much.
Sam Sutter, thank you for your time. I
Thanks,
appreciate
Keith.
it, and good luck.
Great.
I appreciate
Thank you.
it. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you, my friend. Okay.
And thank you for joining us here in FRC Media. I'm Keith Tebow. Please make a point to vote on Tuesday, November 7th.